What's going on, everybody? Today, we're talking about the bedrock of which your entire relationship should stand. We are going to be talking about spiritual intimacy, part 3 of our 3-part series on intimacy and how to become together more as one. As we prepared for this, I thought to myself, spirituality in general should be really the bedrock of who we are as human beings first. Then, as you develop a relationship, develop a marriage, in order to really become one as God has presented us to be when we come together in these 3 phases of intimacy, you really need to start focusing on your spiritual intimacy and how you really grow that. I know for me personally, the more that I've built a relationship with God, the more grace, the more forgiveness I've found, the more blessings come my way, and most importantly, the more inner peace I've felt as a human being, and the more joy I found in my life. And so, what we're going to be talking about today, we cannot understate the importance of and the way that it will reflect and show up in your life. And so, we want you, your spouse, and your relationship to experience the beauty and the oneness that you can only discover if you're spiritually intimate. So hang on tight because we're digging into this one. And as always, I'm here on the Legacy Driven Marriages podcast with my partner in crime, my wife, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody.
If you haven't guessed it by now, today's episode on spiritual intimacy. If I didn't make that clear enough, we're on episode 46. Before we get started, make sure that you go back in, hit subscribe, and make sure that you don't miss one of these episodes, especially the last 2 episodes, 44, 45, and 46 really do go together. And it's such a perfect time of year for us to talk about all 3 of these. Right, Steph? Because I feel like the more one we are moving into this new year, the better we become individually, the more wholesome we become and together as a couple, the more powerful our relationship is going to be. And the more success we're going to have in so many facets of our life. So I'm really excited to dig into this, but make sure that you go back and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast because we appreciate having you guys here and we want to make sure that we keep you here. So let's get this party started today.
Yeah, I wanted to read you guys a quote that we heard recently, and it says, "One learns more of Christ in being married and rearing children than in several lifetimes spent in study in a monastery." And I just think that that's so true. And I think that the reason we do learn so much just by being married and having kids is that we have to really learn that unconditional love. It's the closest we get on this earth to unconditional love, like God loves us, is your spouse and your children. Those are the people he's entrusted you with, that you would have that same experience like he feels for us, because we are God's children. So that's how he feels about us. And so it really does teach you, through all the trials of marriage and the struggles that you have, it's the closest to you'll get to understanding, like, we're imperfect people. They're always going to do things, and, there's always going to be, they affect you, or, it's going to test you to have that grace and mercy and forgiveness for someone, not like anyone else, because that's the person is going to be in your life for a lifetime, not a season, or, so it's just, I think that statement is so powerful and kind of sets the tone for this episode for us, is just that I want you to think about why your spirituality is so important, in that it's because this is, our whole being here in life is because of God, and the way he loves us teaches us how we're supposed to love everyone else. And this really applies in your marriage more than anything.
Yeah, I think the moments I've grown most in my own personal spirituality, the moments where I've grown most as a person are in a lot of the toughest seasons of our life. And one of the seasons I just went through was really asking God to help me build more trust and surrender and unequivocal faith that it's his plan, not my plan, and relinquish some of that control and thus be happier and feel less chaotic inside. Well, God didn't unveil that path to me by making my life perfect.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It was really my breakdown in corporate America. It was for us as a married couple, even building this podcast, building workshops, really starting to work on writing our marriage book, and then figuring out the conflict even within our marriage on being an entrepreneur together. Cause being a couplepreneur is way different than you supporting me going to work like you've done over the last 20 plus years. Right. And me supporting you taking care of the house. So I think it's really important to understand if you're going through one of those seasons, and this is why your spirituality is so important to this, understand that the season is made to help you grow. Even if the season is conflict between you and your spouse, and you don't even know if you're going to make it right now. The couples, heard a statistic in this marriage course that we're doing right now that talked about the couples that trust and truly commit to the process of working on their marriage find themselves happier than they've ever been 80% of the time after 5 years. Because let's be real, you just don't work on your marriage and you're like, oh, and the heavens open up and you turn around and your marriage is just perfect. It'll never be perfect. And if your expectation is that, you're just going to be set up for disappointment. But what happens is you start to be intentional and more committed to working through the hardest things that maybe you shied away from. Leaning on your spirituality in these moments and allowing that to bring you together and be the foundation of what you're building. Like I said, the bedrock of what you're building is the thing that's going to be transformative for for your marriage with your spouse, and also for your family. And that's how we really elevate and change generational legacy. So this really is the linchpin of everything that comes after.
Yeah, something else I wanted to share too is I know for Walt and I, when we got together, we had come from two totally different spiritual walks at that point. I was raised Catholic and we went to church every Sunday. But the weird thing is my parents were not the same religion. And my dad was actually raised Episcopalian. My mom was Catholic, and he didn't really participate with us. He just came on Christmas and Easter, the big holidays. And they're actually pretty similar religions, but he just didn't really practice it. But my mom was very strong in her faith, and she insisted on raising us with the God in our life. And so she took us religiously every Sunday until I left home at 18. So, and then Walt, he came from a lot of chaos in his childhood, and there wasn't religion necessarily. His grandmother was the only one who took him to church, and she took him to a Catholic church, and that was sporadic. He kind of found God, or God found him, I like to think. He has a very cool story about how he kind of came to God, but through a acquaintance, really. I guess you could say a friend, but kind of more of an acquaintance. He kind of ran into and invited him, and it kind of changed the trajectory of his life from that point. So, and when I met him, I always like to share this because knowing he didn't come from that, he came from a lot of turmoil and not raised to know God, really. When I met him, I noticed that, and he was 20 years old. So a 20-year-old guy in the military. And I would see him say a little prayer and do it just like the Catholics do, where we do the sign of the cross. And he would do that over every meal by himself. And it just really stood out to me that I was like, wow, like the level of gratitude that I've never seen anybody do. And I was raised around that. You know what I mean? I was raised with God so much in my life, and we didn't do that. We only said grace at Thanksgiving, pretty much. Like if we sat at a big meal, that was the only time we did. So it was just something that really endeared me to him. Like, wow, I think that's so cool that he shows that kind of appreciation and gratitude for just to be able to eat. And that really humbled me. And so this is kind of what we wanted to get into with this episode, is that having that spiritual foundation is really important, because it is your spouse that will kind of mirror for you. Because like I said, he wasn't even raised with that. And it still showed me things that I had never seen. So I think you should always be, willing to grow, willing to change. We learn things through each other, and that's the beauty in marriage is you have this like mirror in your spouse that you get to see things show up in a way that you didn't for yourself. And, in different ways, Walt and I have rubbed off on each other in that.
Mhm.
And like I said, and now both of us moved together. We decided we wanted God in our life and we wanted to find something that spoke to us. And so we actually tried several different churches and we ended up really loving the Christian church and started raising our kids in that. And it's really awesome the journey we've been on spiritually together. Um, and we've changed. Like we went to a Baptist church and then we went to a Christian
Mhm.
church. And so I hope when you listen to this, just keep an open mind and have perspective that even if you don't believe in God or even if you follow a different religion, we're not saying our way is the right way. We just want you to recognize that spirituality is really important in you as a person, first of all, but also as a foundation for you as a couple. And that we think it's really important that you get on the same page with that because it is really hard to have different beliefs in that and it not affect your marriage. And it doesn't matter what that is. We just believe in having a relationship with God and that He's at the foundation of what you're building.
Yeah, and here's the thing, guys. Everybody finds spirituality through a different avenue, and so we're not pushing what we believe in our spirituality on you, but part of Christianity is bringing people closer to God. And part of that is being able to talk about the word of God that's stated in the Bible. And then through how you live as an example, bringing people to Christ. And also being able to just plant a seed that
Yes.
maybe not have been there before. And so if we do anything for you today, we hope that we just plant a seed and help you maybe lean into the spirituality that you've been avoiding, or maybe help you grow closer in spirituality with your partner, or maybe even just plant the seed that there is something bigger than yourself out there that can help you really find the happiness, the internal happiness that we all crave and want, that we really miss out on sometimes when we make it just about ourselves and there's not a higher being for us, God, that we can give our pains and our struggles to and believe that there's a plan from, even in the tough seasons, that are going to help our life become better if we learn through it, if we have grace and forgiveness through it, and most importantly, if we believe through it that this is all meant for a bigger purpose. Because I got to tell you, that is what got me through the hardest points of my life. That's what got us through really tough spots in marriage. But that's what got me through a lot of childhood abuse. And now I use my story and I believe God let me live the story that I lived on purpose so that I can help reach those people that feel unreachable, that feel like nobody would understand. And it's only through living in that purpose and believing that that's been God's mission on my life all along that I've been able to unlock a happiness inside of me that I didn't even realize I missed out on. And that's not only helped me elevate myself as a person, but it's also helped me become a better husband. Helped me become a better father and friend, and just a steward of what God's mission really is on this earth. And so we're hoping that you find some power in this and really power in the last 3 episodes to become one with your partner, with your spouse, maybe like you've never been. That's what we're doing this. We're not doing the podcast to for us to listen to ourselves. We're doing this podcast to really leave an indelible mark on somebody so that maybe you can go share this with somebody else, or maybe you're the person who shares the lesson you learned and you connect it to your story in a way that helps somebody else connect it to theirs so that they can go do the same things that you're doing in your life right now. So I just got to tell you, if you're just here and you're listening and you're absorbing this and you're taking notes and you're applying and executing on the things that we're talking about, we're super proud of you, man, because so many people are just waiting until their marriage struggles before they actually dig in and start doing the work. And if you're in that place, that's okay. But people need to start doing the work and being intentional about their marriage, and in this case, their spiritual intimacy in their marriage, long before it ever gets to be a problem. Because it's a lot easier to finesse something, to maneuver something when times are good. The struggle is really when times are bad. And we're going to talk about 4 different ways that you can really dig into this piece now if you're in that tough season to really elevate your marriage and get out of that crazy cycle that we all live in sometimes in our relationships in order to get back to that blessed, beautiful cycle and that oneness that marriage is really supposed to become. And Steph, you mentioned it a minute ago when you said you saw me praying over my food. For me, I knew what it was like to go hungry as a kid. So I've always had just a healthy respect for food and felt like God, it was a blessing to really be able to eat. And the first thing we want to talk about is really don't wait for your spouse to jump into their spiritual journey. Start leading by example because your spiritual journey has to be moving whether your spouse's is or not. If you want to unlock that internal freedom and happiness that I talked about, if you're setting that example and if you're doing the work on yourself, your spouse is going to see that in how you show up. Your spouse is going to see that and what are you doing and what's the result of these things that you're doing? For instance, I started going to a men's group and I never had before. When I had my breakdown in corporate America, I felt like I just needed the iron sharpens iron mentality of being around other men in their walk with God. Stephanie saw that as an example. I went by myself. I've gotten a couple buddies to go with me, but really it's about my walk with God in that moment. She's seen how that's changed who I am. And when you do that, you guys can start to grow together too, because your spouse will find the path in their own journey based upon the example you're setting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Walt actually, he told me at the time, this was right after he had a breakdown in corporate America and walked away from that job and was feeling just, it was just a dark time for him. And he told me that he really decided he wanted to go to a men's group because he's like, I just feel like I just need a men's, like, be able to go to something where I feel like I can grow in my spiritual journey because I know I need to do that. And I respect that. And personally, I wasn't going like that. And for years, it had to do with our kids. I was always taking them to activities, and I prioritized that over going to church. And so I didn't go to a women's group, and they didn't offer a couples group. And
And we were going on Sundays together.
yes, we always go to church on Sundays, and there are other things at the church that we would do. We just hadn't joined the Bible study groups. And I saw him go, and I could tell it was actually very helpful for him. And he was able to connect with some men that can understand where he's coming from. And, he was kind of getting some of what he needed personally for his. I felt like I didn't really, it's not that you can't always grow in it. I've always been strong in my faith. I don't struggle with that. I really do believe in God, and I've seen God show up in my life multiple times. And even in our relationship, I actually have another cool story to share about how it played out in our relationship.
I was going to say, before you hit that story, I think that's one of the things that I have always really respected about you is you had so much grace and forgiveness in those moments, sometimes when I was unlovable, and you still loved me through those moments. And so through seeing you live that out, even if you didn't go to a group, you seeing you live that out, it made me want to be more like that, to be able to find that and find that joy. And so even though Steph didn't go to a group, she was living out her own spiritual journey and being an example for me, even though she didn't even know.
Sorry, guys, if you could see me on video, but this makes me emotional because this really hits home for me. Like, I've just seen God show up in our lives so many times, and I want to share that because I think a lot of people need this in their life. And so if we can even bring one person closer to God, then we've done our job. So I was going to say, part of like Walt joining that group, I had my own kind of fears too about, we did a lot of moving with the military, and
I had gone to a mom's group when I was a new mother, and it wasn't a great experience. So that kind of kept me from joining the Bible study with the women, because I always was the outsider and the new person, and it never felt welcoming. And but seeing him go and do it, we ended up joining this marriage one and going as a couple, and it's been an amazing experience. We've really bonded with these people in that group, and everyone was really cool. And
A lot of healing happening in there.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman in there, I talked about this. I shared this in the group about how I had a bad experience and I haven't gone to the Bible study. And she had a similar thing happen, and she said she had gone to one and same thing. It wasn't a great experience, and she didn't go back. And so then she's like, "Hey, Stephanie, you want to go with me? Like the next one that starts up, you want to come with me?" And so I think I'm going to go with her and start going. And so this is the beauty in it, you guys. You see how it took him, and seeing him go do that when I knew, he wasn't really strong in his faith, but he took that leap to grow himself, and that really affected me and made me start thinking, I need to start to work on my own a little bit more too. And so I was going to share that the whole reason that this is like our why, the whole reason that we do this podcast, the whole reason we got into this marriage stuff is because when Walt and I were in a dark place in our marriage and we were really close to divorce, we had that come to Jesus moment we've talked about many times. And no joke, 2 months after it happened, like, we had this come to Jesus moment. I will never forget it. It was the very beginning of January. And in February, we found out about this Christian marriage conference that was coming to town. And it actually wasn't even in our town that we lived. It was still like 2 hours away. We lived in Virginia Beach, and it was in Williamsburg. And we asked my parents to come watch the kids so we could go to it. And I kid you not, it was a 2-day conference. It's the Love and Respect Conference. It's still out there. There's a whole book and workbook. Amazing. And it changed us as people. It changed our marriage. It changed everything for us moving forward after that conference. I kid you not. And it wasn't even there was like a little bit of a workbook back then. I think they've expanded on it now. But, and not that everything changed immediately that weekend in our marriage, not at all. But it did change something. It planted that seed that we needed to do some changing as individuals and then in our marriage. And from that point, we started to make small changes. And it still took us, I'm not going to lie, it still took several years to work through all of the emotion and things that had built up to that point, which is understandable because it took us years to get there. It happened when 12 years into our marriage. And that was a slow trickle that built over many years. And after that, it still took several years to work through that. But oh my gosh, I can't tell you guys how worth it is to invest in that way. And because of that conference, we will never forget it. We will never forget some of the big things that we took away from it. And it's what made us want to do this, because we know the power in this spiritual intimacy is what saved our marriage. And God was at the heart of that, because God was the one actually changing us, not anything else. And I give him all the credit, all the glory, because it does go to him. I could get into more details, but there were specific things that happened that I know it was him. There's no other explanation.
And that's the thing, guys, is we waited until the hardest season of our marriage and the hardest times of our marriage to actually start doing the work. by the grace of God, there was something there, like Stephanie said, the Love and Respect Conference, that accelerated that healing process and just built some self-awareness that we wouldn't have had if we didn't go to that. So if you're in the struggle, it's okay. Better times are ahead. That's why you're listening to this. That's why you saw this clip. If you saw it on social media, that's why you're part of the Legacy Driven Marriages Facebook group. Whatever it is, however you've connected, it's God working in your life. And here's the thing, man, like,
And something else I didn't share, sorry. Right before our come to Jesus moment, I also, kid you not, I was on my knees praying to God to help me, and that I was giving it to him, and that I didn't know what else to do, because I felt like that night when I confronted him, that was going to be the end of our marriage. And I literally said to him, I don't know what else to do. Please help. And that's why I say, and then right after that was that marriage conference. That was a Christian marriage conference. And man, and the talk that Walt and I had didn't go anything like I thought it would. I actually thought that
in a good way.
Yeah. I actually thought that when I told him that was going to be it, and I saw a change in him in that moment, he actually started to cry and basically told me, no, I still love you. And, we talked through it, and it was like unbelievable how calm the conversation went. And there was just a peace there that I can't even explain. I just know it was him, because I even found myself in that moment, like, I don't even know how I'm reacting like this right now, because I had so much hurt and anger and all this stuff inside of me, swirling inside of me all day that day before we had this talk. And in that moment, though, I felt peace. And it was him. I mean, how else do you explain it?
So look, there's so many. I want to talk to the fellas real quick, because when I talked about this iron sharpen iron mentality, there's so many of you out there struggling. You're trying to provide, you're trying to protect your family, you're trying to give everything you can. Maybe you're trying not to pick up that drink. Maybe you're trying not to send that text out to that person you're not supposed to. Maybe you feel underappreciated, undervalued. Maybe you don't feel respected in your home. This is why there's times to go work on you, work on your spiritual journey, go to a men's group with other men that are working to create the most powerful versions of themselves through God. And when you get around other men that are willing to challenge your way of thinking, that are willing to really move you in a direction that you're meant to go, instead of getting around other men who have given up on their marriage, who aren't doing the things that they're supposed to, who are going to feed into that enemy's desire to tell you that everything you're doing is okay and all the things you're feeling is okay. When you take a step back and you move towards God in the same way that I did, in that stress and that like lack of continuity I felt in who I was as a person anymore, not showing up as a husband and father, not showing up for myself, and just being a slave to work. When I moved towards other men who understood how I felt in the house that God built, they helped me move past that in a way that I couldn't have ever done on my own. And so you don't have to suffer in silence, guys. There's plenty of people who understand how you feel. You're not alone, but you do have to move in a direction and take action that's sometimes really uncomfortable to get in a position and around people who will help you be a better version of you. That's why working on your own spirituality is just as important as working on your spirituality as a couple. The next thing we're going to talk about, Steph, I'll let you tell this story because it is pretty funny, is praying together. You ever heard the comment, a couple that prays together stays together? It's so true. There's such an intimacy in praying together. And even though it's super awkward at first, you want to tell us when you're laughing, right? I want Steph to tell this little story because we're just starting to like really pray together. We've been praying on our own, but really praying together as a couple, not just praying for each other in a quiet to ourselves, but praying together as a couple. sitting, kneeling right next side by side, holding hands with each other as we pray to God. It's kind of awkward at first.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys this is another situation where God is just talking to you, because I've prayed all my life. I mean, as long as I can remember, I was taught to pray. But it was always in silent and always to myself. In the Catholic religion, you don't pray out loud. In the Christian religion, it's really different, and they pray out loud all the time, and in big groups and small groups and together. And
they got their hands up at church and all that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh, it's so completely opposite of what I was raised with all those years. So it has been really hard for me to pray out loud, and I never thought I would feel that block, but it is pretty funny because.
Well, okay. So before you tell that story about, you can tell the one where you laughed and all, like, right. So before you tell that, I got to say, I'm super proud of Stephanie, because we facilitated some of these marriage groups that we're in, and we're actually going to take our own group this next time. And Steph opens with prayer at the start, and then I'll close us out, right? So we'll have our pieces of the puzzle. And let me tell you what.
So not lying, this is the first time I've ever had to do it in a group setting.
So awkward for us to do it together, but
yeah, and I was struggling to even do it with Walt,
so
person who knows me better than anyone.
Her hands might be clammy, and nobody can feel them except for me when we're all praying in that moment. But she did it. She did it, and you could tell, like, the first week, it was really good because you spoke from the heart. You just prayed what you felt, but then you were less nervous the second week, and it's every time you do it, it becomes easier and more natural than it would have been. So I've been really proud of you for doing that, because I know in general, like, if we weren't doing this stuff, the marriage stuff, you would have been like, "No, babe, you could do it. Go ahead. That's your thing. You're the extrovert. I'm the introvert. Remember?"
Oh yes, and there's been many times where we've been in some other situations, like our Friendsgiving, and everybody asks Walt to do it.
I know, it's like 40 people. Well, you gonna do the say the prayer? I'm like, man, y'all better stop.
I'm like, I totally would pass it off to Walt, because that is like so uncomfortable for me, you guys. So this, I'm sharing with you just how much, like, I have these struggles. I'm working on stuff for myself. This is one of those things. I have this real block with praying out loud. And so we went to a workshop recently. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, the Stronger Marriages, Trey and Lee Morgan. They held a workshop here in Phoenix a couple months ago, and we went because a friend from his Bible study group told him about it and invited him to go. So we were like, cool, yeah, we loved. I swear, this is what I mean. We went to Love and Respect ever since then. Now, anytime we see something like that, I'm all about it. I don't care how good our marriage or how bad our marriage is. Yep. You can always improve. Yep. So any chance we get to go to something like that, we go.
Don't let your marriage get bad because you don't go when you have a chance to do it when your marriage is good.
Yeah. And one of the things that they talked about at this workshop, so this was recent, and we had already been doing this podcast, and they talked about praying together in that. And that was something, I don't know if it's ever been mentioned before, but it just, I don't know why in that moment it hit me in a different way. And I was like, that's something we don't do, and we never really thought about doing, but it totally makes sense that how much would that bring you together if you do that? And so Walt and I, from that workshop, then we were like, that's something we need to start doing. Let's start working on that. Well, we kneeled down next to our bed together, and so Walt's like, okay, let's do this. And he went first. The first night he did it, and it was all good. The second night, he's like, it's your turn. Joking,
I go, you go. I go, you go.
Like, so nervous. Like, I didn't even know what to say. It was like blank. Like,
now, mind you, it's just me and Stephanie in the room right before bed, getting ready to pray. Nobody else in the room except for us.
And I was just like, this is so awkward, because I'm used to that being a private thing that I'm speaking to God by myself, and it just felt so weird to say it. It was awkward for me to say it out loud, and I just started like, we go to start praying, and I just started laughing.
Steph says, "Dear God," and just stopped And then I'm sorry, y'all, I couldn't keep it serious no more either. And then we both just busted up laughing. But it's become such an endearing memory for us now that we wouldn't have had if we wouldn't have tried to pray together. And then right before the podcast, like we just prayed that God gives us the words to speak that matters to the person that needs to hear it the most. And Stephanie said that prayer for us. So it's becoming easier as we repeat it. It's like,
yeah. And then and now we're in this marriage group at our church right now. And we ended up facilitating a couple of the lessons. And so that is what they do at the beginning. Someone prays in, and at the end they pray out. And so I had to do the pray in front of the. Now, luckily, this particular class, half of the class didn't come to that one because it was like it's holiday time, and one of them we were doing it because their leaders were on a vacation, and it just so happened that two of them couldn't make it that night. So it was the smallest group we've had when I had to do it for the first time.
God was right there looking out for her.
So I did it the first time in front of the smaller group. I made it through. I had to do it again the next week. And like he said, so it's starting to get easier for me. But I got to tell you, it will be awkward and uncomfortable. But man, it brings you together in a way that's so different from anything else. Mm-hmm. And it makes you talk to God together. And then you can kind of see, I mean, maybe not all the way, but it kind of makes you have to face things that you don't want to face too. And I just think it's really important.
And it's hard to pray for your spouse when you're mad at them. It's hard to show that grace and forgiveness. So create that positive moment in your relationship. Remember that a couple that prays together stays together, and lean all the way in on that. The next piece we want to talk about is confronting sin together. And Stephanie talked about that. I don't want to belabor this point because you told a great story about what it did in our relationship before the Love and Respect conference. You got to ask yourself, are you just choosing to look at the imperfections on your spouse? Are you only looking at the things that they're doing wrong? Are you never in gratitude for the things that they're doing right? Are you never looking at the way that they do show up perfect for you? You got to start asking yourselves, what lens am I looking at my spouse at? Am I even giving them the grace and forgiveness that I expect them to give me, even though I'm not even giving any of it to them? And that doesn't mean, the minor offenses, you can let some of that stuff go. There's a time and a place to have these conversations for these things that are building up.
This is where you got to kind of be aware of your spouse. Like if you know your spouse is feeling stress from something, like their job has been stressful, or that there's something in their life like going on in their family or whatever it is, they're tired. There's different things you can recognize in your spouse and know if they snap at you that maybe they're just having a bad day, and you can let that go. And so those little things we can let go sometimes. It's the big sins that are happening that you need to address. If there is abuse going on, if there is an addiction of some sort, whether that's a substance abuse addiction, a gambling addiction, big things that are going to affect you, your relationship, and your family, they need to be confronted. So yeah, I shared a little bit about how that affected us, and I did confront Walt on something that was happening with us. And not to say that it didn't, I shouldn't have been placing blame just because there was infidelity there, but I shouldn't have been placing blame solely on him because there's a reason that happens. And he's not being fulfilled in some way. So I was not doing my job as a spouse at the time. Now, there's different things, like some people have actual depression or things that, mentally with them or whatever. There's things that some of us struggle with. There are people who are bipolar and things like that. And those kinds of things need special attention. You might actually need to go to a specialist for those kinds of things. And that can't be dealt with by you necessarily. So there's different
ways that you just need to become aware in your relationship too, to what's happening. Now, if something keeps happening, if they keep being rude to you over and over, then no, you don't let that go. You need to talk about that. You need to confront that, find out what's going on with them. You know, I know for Walt, he has a lot of physical pain that I'm not going to realize that he's feeling that. I can't feel that. So he has to let me know that. He has to communicate that. And I always say, like, and if you do communicate, this is why the communication is so important. If you communicate those things, then your spouse can have a lot more patience and empathy with you if they know what's going on. But if you're just lashing out and snapping and they don't know what's going on with you, then that's really unfair to them because they can't be there for you in the same way. So there's pieces. This is why we say, like, take the magnifying glass off your spouse, turn the mirror on yourself, because you need to both be aware individually. Are you communicating to your spouse? Are you doing those things that help them and grow them as much as yourself? I mean, it's not fair to get mad or, turn it on them if you weren't being honest in your communication, and there's a lot of that stuff that there's a lot more to it than just, flat out sin, but you do need to address the big things.
Well, I think also, if somebody's acting out of character because of stress, and it's one time, that's something. But if it's this continual thing that's happening and you're feeling this resentment built up, if you really are spiritually aligned and connected, you're going to want to come to them in a loving way, full of grace and forgiveness, but still a way that allows you to have the conversation. You can say, hey, are you okay? I've noticed recently you've been a lot shorter with me. You've been a lot shorter with the kids. We love you. We love you when you're at your best. Like, what's going on? Talk to me about what's bothering you. And there's a real intimacy that comes in those vulnerable conversations with each other where somebody stops trying to bear the burden of everything in their life and they share it with their spouse in a way where they can just kind of unload and speak the truth and speak out loud about the things that are bothering with them. And man, we're pretty poor at this. But let me tell you what, there's a freedom that comes with that. And there's a special connection and an intimate connection that really comes with your spouse when you have those conversations. And I think men and women need to strip the pride away, strip the ego away, strip the pain away that they're feeling in the moment and say, hey, I'm going to love and be there for my spouse, maybe in a way that I haven't. Are you okay? I've been noticing lately that this is happening and I love you and I want the best for you. Talk to me about what's going on. Man.
Yeah,
you
this is
have those conversations.
I love how you just put that. And that was something I was going to share a little story, but where this exact thing happened in our relationship. When Walt had his breakdown in corporate America, he was working crazy hours. It was during COVID. And unlike some people where they ended up with no work, he had double the work. And he was working crazy hours and it was very stressful. And one evening he came in and he said to me something about, like, where's dinner? And it was like 5:30 in the evening. And it was just the way he said it to me. It was like snappy. And I don't know why, but at that moment, he hadn't done anything like that. Like, he hadn't talked to me that way in a long time. So I was like, there's something going on here. So that's where I was saying, like, have that awareness, because I know my spouse and I know how he normally acts. And I felt like that was out of character that day. And so instead of reacting and getting mad and, lashing out back, I actually stopped and said, are you okay? And crazy enough, I think, because I reacted differently, he kind of broke down in that moment and shared just how he was feeling. And it was actually after that conversation that we talked about him leaving his job, because it was just too much. I told him, like, this is not healthy. It's not good for you. Like, no matter what, you just need to leave this job. But anyway, that was one of those moments where we have to, one thing I wanted to stress about this is not letting your pride get in the way. A lot of us, that is the sin that we're confronting, is our own pride and ego. All of us have it.
that's kind of the natural, it's a human response, is to have pride. And sometimes we, just don't want to admit something that we're doing because it's our pride and nothing else. And so don't let those little things either get in the way, because those little things become big things. And if we don't address them and communicate them to our partner, it's going to turn into something much bigger that is a lot harder to deal with down the road.
Yeah, and I think that goes into this fourth key, this last piece of this. There is nothing more powerful than you being able to set your emotion aside in the moment and encourage your spouse when they're faint-hearted, when they're having a weak moment, when they're just really in this tumultuous, chaotic, inner turmoil environment that's happening outside the relationship that they're bringing into the relationship. Your ability to show mercy and love and patience to help your spouse grow in those moments will resonate in your relationship long after that moment happens. Because the reality is, a relationship is 100-100. A relationship isn't 50-50. If you expect a relationship to be 50-50, you're going to be in a transactional relationship where they do something for you, you do something for them, and vice versa. If you just know
That's a
you got to
contract.
fully commit and invest in your relationship, it should be 100-100. So stop looking to your spouse to invest their 100, especially when you're not even maybe investing yours. Just invest your 100. What's going to happen is you guys over time will invest more into your relationship than even that, because your spouse can't quite invest 100 because they're struggling with something personally. And when you can really do that and commit to doing that for each other, everything else kind of just takes care of itself, because the commitment and the love and the patience and the grace and the kindness that bring us together spiritually and intimately in that will be so godlike that it doesn't have any choice but to positively affect our relationship. That's where you want to go. So if you learn nothing else from this today, learn how to keep your relationship 100-100 and focus on you giving your 100, not your spouse giving theirs. And watch how that transforms your relationship.
He just said that perfectly. Yes. 100 from both of you. That's what it takes. And this is kind of wrapping up. This was our third part of this intimacy series. It takes the spiritual, emotional, and physical intimacy to have that complete marriage where it's healthy and thriving. And that's our goal for all of you, is to reach that healthy, striving marriage. And you can do it. It's going to take a lot of work and effort on your part, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, it's better than the work and effort of starting all over again. How about you invest into the person 100% of the time? I heard a quote the other day, and somebody said, if you don't date your spouse, then somebody else will. So you have a choice on whether or not you're going to continue to do the work, or if you're going to allow yourself to be emotionally, physically, or spiritually lazy in your relationship. The choice you make will determine whether or not your relationship really does change the legacies in a positive way for generations to come. That example you set will last for generations. And so look, guys, part of this whole thing, if you haven't, like Steph said, go listen to the other two episodes, 44, 45, and now 46. But also get in the arena with other couples fighting for their relationship. Go to Facebook, join our Facebook group. We're just starting to build that and build the movement of powerful couples working on their relationship, where we can all be in the same arena, supporting each other, giving wisdom to each other, helping each other. Share this episode with a friend that you know needs this for their relationship too. And as always, if you have any topics or anything you want us to discuss, we love getting that. We have somebody who sent us like 10 topics they wanted us to discuss.
I want to say thank you to a lot of people in our Facebook group that have given us feedback, and please keep it coming. Like, we need to hear that stuff. We need to know what you guys want to hear about, what you want to learn. Like, we're an open book, so we're willing to share whatever it takes to help your relationships. And we, I was going to say, sorry.
Well, and I just want to leave it as have a Merry Christmas season. Enjoy the time with your family. Enjoy the time with your spouse. I know it can be stressful when you have, extended family around, and the holiday season can be stressful in itself. Take some time to just be present. Stephanie and I, speaking of that, are going to take some time to be present. We're going to pick a couple of our most downloaded episodes that have helped us get to a top 5% global podcast. And we're going to put some of those over the next 2 weeks so that we can be present with family during the Christmas season too. But look, guys, until the next time.
Yes. And Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah. All right, let's start this again, Steph. Ready? Until the next time.
Get into the arena of your marriage, keep fighting for your relationship, and keep elevating your generational legacy. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Let's go.